Welcome to another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Deligro, your host today, and my guest is Brian Samson. He's the founder and chairman of Plugg Technologies. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're talking before the show. You're in Hawaii. Tough life.
Yeah, but I feel like I earned it. Grew up in the Midwest in Chicago, so I've scraped more than my fair share of windshields. Started my car in 0-degree weather, so I feel like I earned it a little bit.
Yeah, I've been in Texas for a while now, but I'm originally from Boston, so I feel your pain. I can't tell you how many pairs of shoes I've ruined in the wintertime and scraping windshields. And I miss Boston a little bit because it's my home, but I don't miss the winters. That's for sure.
Yeah. The winters get long. When it's Christmas time, it's one thing, but when it's March and it's
April.
Still snowing and 12 degrees outside, it's over.
Yeah. So to start with, Brian, we'll tell me a little bit about Plugg Technologies, and that should tee it up for our conversation.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've got a lot of really smart listeners who've heard of offshoring before. And offshoring, we tend to think of everything from a U.S. perspective. Yeah. So for the U.S., there's really three big countries that everyone's familiar with offshoring: China, Philippines, and India.
Right.
China's become like the world's factory for decades and decades. That's where stuff gets made. Philippines have really become like the world's call center. So back office, virtual assistants, things like that. And then India has been doing IT offshoring, since like the dot-com boom, right? Way back in like the 90s.
So I can speak to that a little bit because I'm in technology sales, and a lot of the companies that have a follow the sun type of support have a lot of support out of India. So I can speak firsthand about that one.
Yeah, and I think something kind of happened, and I can get into that a little bit later. But just in a nutshell, what Plugg does is I think there was fatigue with the offshore model because you've got this big ocean in the middle. So that means nobody was ever really awake at the same time. So either people are awake at 3 a.m. and working just so they could accommodate you. That leads to burnout. But on the plus side, you can't beat Asia on price. It's really, really cost effective. But I think there's just more and more interest in time zone aligned workday. And that's what we do. It's called nearshoring, not offshoring.
Okay.
So there's no big ocean to hop over, same continent. And we are talent connectors. So Latin America's got a lot of stuff going for it I can get into later. But we've got the whole infrastructure to do about 100 placements every year for Latin America talent with U.S. companies.
So when you say Latin America talent, you mean they still live in Latin America, but they work for American companies. Is that it?
That's exactly correct. Yeah. So we're not like an immigration shop. We're a recruiting company, basically. So people are in their homes working just like you and I are today.
Yeah. The world. I mean, it sounds cliche, but the world is getting smaller and smaller with technology.
Yeah. And, I think COVID was a big factor in driving nearshore because I don't know why. And I'd worked in tech companies forever, but working from home was always so taboo and so weird, and such a tiny percentage of people did it. Then all of a sudden COVID made it normal. Companies had to figure it out. But once they figured it out, they realized how they needed people still in the same time zone, right? Yeah. Because all of a sudden everyone wanted to move to Bali, Indonesia, and be digital nomads and kind of work from there. But the magic happens when you've got an issue or a question and you can hop right on Slack or WhatsApp or Zoom or Google Meet or Jira and just kind of figure it out right there in the moment. And it means that work is really, it's got to move fast
Yeah.
and it's got to be collaborative. And that's what having people in the same time zone will do for your business.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, so the other frustrating piece about that, like you said, is having people halfway around the world. No one's sleeping at the same time. Um, and the other thing too that was frustrating, and I know a lot of listeners are going to probably agree with me. Sometimes the language barrier, right? Like they say they speak English, but I'll be hard pressed to say it's all English because I can't understand half of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. And I think that's another interest in Latin America. So when you talk to somebody in the Philippines and India, and I've got a lot of great things to say about these countries, so we're not just going to poo-poo on it.
Sure.
But I think there's like three cultural pieces that cause a lot of frustration, and companies often don't even think about this. So you've got English that doesn't totally feel like our English, right? Like they'll use words that are just a little bit different, or um, they don't quite understand like the slang or the colloquialisms or pop culture. It's very much like their style. Um, you also will look at the way companies are organized, and it's very top down in Asia. I had the benefit to do an MBA in Singapore, National University of Singapore,
Wow.
and it's wild how hierarchical and like this kind of respect for seniority is.
Yeah.
And you've been in tech a long time. I'm sure you worked with India, and like you're rarely talking directly to the person doing the work. There's like 7 layers in the middle, and you've got to play telephone, and no one will tell you when they disagree with you. They'll just kind of acknowledge that they heard you.
And is
See
that
who
is
knows.
that a respect type of cultural thing? Is what you're saying?
Yeah. We're in the States. If we think somebody's wrong, and I think you especially, you're a Boston guy. You're probably used to,
Yeah, we're gonna
like
yeah. You're gonna know where
yeah,
you stand with guys like me pretty quick.
yeah, and I mean, I'm a Chicago guy, Boston guy. We could probably get into sports, but like, we're not afraid to debate, argue,
Yep.
disagree. And I think that's not just a Boston, Chicago thing. I think it's just like culturally in America, we're used to horizontal layers, horizontal structures. We share when we disagree, but that's not the case in Asia. People just don't do that, especially disagreeing upward. And the last thing I'll get to, which I think is really critical, if you've ever had to call United Airlines and you get connected to the call center, maybe it's India, maybe it's the Philippines, um, and you have something that's like very easy to do, like I was traveling from Boston to Charlotte, and I just want to switch my seat. No problem, Mr. Paul. We got you covered, right?
Yep.
But now all of a sudden your issue is, hey, actually, I want to reroute through DC before I get to Charlotte because I got another meeting there and I need to change the date. But can I use miles for the second half of my trip? Try telling that to somebody in India or the Philippines, and it's gonna like just create this mountain of frustration for both of you because it's not within their box
Yeah.
of process to solve. And you're and I don't know if you love United or not, but for this argument, let's say that you really enjoy the flight experience, and the seat's nice, they're on time departure, all that. You forget all about all that because you're so frustrated with this call center. And United wanted to save a few dollars, right, on hourly rates, but they forget about the churn that happens, and people
Right.
just get so frustrated that they never want to deal. They never want to deal with your company again because of this. call center experience that was outside the box of problems.
Yeah. So how is that excuse me, how is that different from the Latin American experience?
Yeah. So Latin America is a really interesting place. Now, of course, Spanish is the first language, but a lot of people, and I'll take Argentina for example, um, because there's a few countries that are in the news more often than not. There's Venezuela, and we just
Well,
had the Maduro.
recently for sure with
Yeah,
Venezuela.
yeah. Mexico, you hear about the cartels, Argentina, hyperinflation, things like that. So we hear the headlines, but we forget about the headlines are due to leadership, not the people. And the people have to live in these kind of volatile, Wild West environments. But you know what that builds? That builds, number one, their interest in accelerating and leveling up their US style English because they want to work with the US.
Right.
So when you talk to somebody that's fluent in English in Latin America, you're like, wow, this is like my English,
Yeah.
not like a weird English. This is
Yeah.
my. They're watching the same Netflix shows we are in English. They want to talk U.S. politics. They want to debate. They know the news. They know all the music, the movies, everything. Um, but then they also, have had this kind of wild environment. So they've learned to be really scrappy, adaptable, flexible, creative, hardworking. I mean, Paul, like any entrepreneur, any hiring manager wants traits like that, in their people, because they're dealing with like wild inflation, they're dealing with terrible government policy, and all day long, they're dealing with chaos, and they've got to be calm, and they've got to find workarounds around it. So you don't have to worry about giving them a box because their whole life is figuring stuff outside the box. That's their whole life.
Yeah.
Stuff that would just scare us. Like, remember a couple of years ago when inflation was like 10% or 12% for us, and all of a sudden groceries seemed high, and
Yep.
I mean, this
Gas,
is like
eggs.
everything. Yeah, eggs was a great example.
Yeah.
And everyone was like panicking, and every social media post was about eggs, But this is just normal daily life, in Latin America.
Yeah.
So they're just used to it. They figure stuff out. There's no box. They're just able to maneuver no matter what.
Yeah, so I can tell you from my experience, you got me thinking. We were working with a company like yours, by the way, and we had they were supplying technical resources for one of our companies that we do business with, and that company ended up hiring that person full time from that company, and everything was above board. Everyone agreed to it that it was right. I do have a question for you. How does that work from a tax standpoint and an employee standpoint? If you got something in this case, it was someone from Colombia.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Sure.
That, we were paying the company like yours, so we didn't know what happened on the back end. We know that, hey, you worked 20 hours for us this week. We're paying you for 20 hours. Whatever you pay them, how you figure that out, that's on you. But when you get hired by a company directly, how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of two threads there. So the first is we operate just like the company that you talked about. We've got a U.S. entity, which makes it really easy for our customers, which are all U.S. customers.
Right.
They're not sending any crazy international wires. It's U.S. contracts, U.S. banking, all that stuff. And then we just manage everything that happens south of the border. So things like ganancias and taxes and aguinaldo and all this other stuff that's very unique to Latin America. We figure it all out. We do all the and even things like I know you're talking about payment, but Latin America can also be kind of tricky with tariffs and getting the equipment. I used to run a software company in Buenos Aires, and every trip I made it was just loaded with as much hardware as I could fit in there. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
I was like a hardware smuggler, and because it's really expensive. they try to fuel the domestic production there, which means making it really difficult for external uh, countries and companies to do business and import their products there. So therefore, the cost to get anything that's made outside of Argentina, and this applies to a lot of countries in Latin America, as they try to be, very pro country production, just makes it so expensive. So
Yeah.
anyway, we handle all the movement of machines and procurement and all that, which is way more complicated than. But it's our problem to solve. Like
Right.
we don't need the U.S. customer to care about that. We'll get them the hardware, we'll get them paid, we'll get all that stuff. Now we live in a 2026 is a whole new era for employer of record. Uh, 10 years ago, this certainly didn't exist. If you wanted to employ people, you had to really invest in the entities, and sometimes these things could take months and months, and it's ambiguous. And uh, I mean, Texas is a great state to do business in. I know you're in Dallas, and it's easy. It's very pro-employer. Uh, Latin American can be the opposite. And, you're kind of crossing your fingers that in 4 months, a bureaucrat's going to approve your entity and you can set up a bank account and get payroll set up. So that's hard to do. But there's a lot of employer record companies out there now that allow you to hire somebody in a different country, then use a middleman employer record company to
Okay.
either their employees or contractors, you know, um, the same thing that Upwork does, but they just focus on the payment part.
Yeah. So if you're working in like in this case with you, Argentina or Venezuela, who do they pay taxes to?
Yeah, so it really depends on if they're a contractor employee, but nonetheless, they are paying it within their own country.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense then, because I always want. I never asked. Something I didn't want to
yeah,
know. To be honest,
yeah,
all I know
yeah,
is we dealt with a guy like you, and we paid you. That was it.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and,
and that's
and our
really
customer.
all customers, yeah, need to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, but you did touch on something earlier. With all the tariffs that are going on today, how is that affecting your business?
Yeah, so ironically, it's never been a better time to be in Latin America. I really think the 2020s, all the wind is in our sails. But it's not just the IT, which is where we tend to do more placements as software engineers. But when you think about tariffs, I mean, a lot less manufacturing is being done in China, and more of it's moving to Mexico. Mexico was always kind of set up for it. I was on a flight recently to Monterrey, Mexico. And for those that don't know, Monterrey is only about 3 hours from the border. It's surrounded by these beautiful granite mountains, but it's kind of a like desertish landscape, a little dusty, and there's auto companies everywhere.
Yep.
So on my flight, it was interesting enough, it was me and almost entirely guys from Korea that were coming to do manufacturing, or like they were engineers or white collar workers to oversee the Korean manufacturing, of these plants in Monterrey, Mexico. So Mexico has really started to take a lot of that work that previously went to China and now is being done there. From a software standpoint and technical standpoint, a lot of work that used to go to India, is now going to Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, things like that. A lot of call center work is now being done instead of the Philippines, Central America. But to answer your kind of broader question, um, politics matters, and like who's in charge matters, and policy drives different things. So right now, India and China, are kind of on the bad list, like the naughty list right
Yeah.
now, in the Trump
Well,
administration. Yeah.
let's be honest here. Trump's trying to move everything back to the states, right?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
much as he
Yeah.
can, right? That's
Yeah.
never going to be possible to do 100%, but he's trying to increase the manufacturing base here in the states, and probably a lot of the offshoring and nearshoring that you're doing, he's probably trying to move some of that back to the states as well, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah. And and even like I don't know like how many levels of chess the administration is doing here, but even with Venezuela, it's really controlling the oil in the
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere, right? And then if you can choke China's oil from Venezuela and Iran, that really kind of powers down China
Yep.
and maybe even powers down their AI hopes, right? Because you need a lot of energy, a lot of power there.
Yep.
So kind of depends like how many levels of chess we're playing here, but really, uh, I think the Trump administration is pro Americas. They're certainly pro America, but pro Americas. Like if something's being done in Argentina, Trump and Milei are best buddies. Um, I think that's a win for the administration. If oil companies can operate in Venezuela, that's a win for the administration. So it's not entirely. It's got to be like a plant in Arizona or a plant in Ohio. But I think as the work shifts to the Americas, the administration's happy.
Well, yeah. So Trump's talked about that. That's why he made a move on Maduro in Venezuela, because they're close to home, relatively speaking, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We're we got two big oceans on each side of us, so we're not too worried about getting hit and bombed by, especially with the Iran situation going on right now, or Russia. We'd see it coming a long way ahead of time. But, Venezuela is not far from us.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That's
So,
absolutely right. Yeah. So you don't want these foreign countries that are enemies, snuffing around and seizing production.
yeah, no, so we'll see how, so far it seems to be working pretty well. But, I'm not a politician, and I watch TV just like you do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
try to stay abreast of what's going on in the whole, you know, I don't know, man. It just seems like lately it's just been crazier than ever. I mean, between Israel and, the Gaza Strip, and then, Russia and the Ukraine. Now we've got Israel and the United States bombing the shit out of,
yeah.
Iran. And then Venezuela. It's just, I don't know. It seems like it's crazier than normal. Maybe time passes, you forget, but this seems like a very volatile time in our world right now.
Yeah, and to hit on that geopolitics for a second. So even like the Ukraine war, a lot of software jobs used to go to Ukraine, right? But now they're busy fighting, right? And whatever side you're on there, um, those jobs have actually moved, and a lot of them have moved to Latin America.
Really?
A lot of the IT jobs,
Yeah.
have moved from Eastern Europe to Latin America. Venezuela, it's opening. So this 28 million labor force is open for business.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of engineers, highly educated, excellent English, kind of ready to go. So that's a huge talent pool that's now available, to
Yeah.
the state. Mexico has its issues, of course, with the cartels, but this is a massive, 100 plus million labor force. Brazil, massive. I mean, they're making huge investments in startup cities like
Sure.
Florianopolis, where it's like a tax-free zone to inspire innovation. And, we hear about Dubai, that's kind of tried to create this startup world. But, that's a risky region right now,
Yeah.
right? So,
Sure it is. Yeah.
so if Brazil can be a replacement for companies, for investors investing capital into like hot new fintechs and other software businesses, AI companies, that's another angle there.
Yeah. So, quick question, Brian. How'd you get into this business? Because this isn't something you just like, you wake up tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to start a nearshoring, offshoring business. you know?
Yeah, yeah. I was in San Francisco a little over 10 years ago, and had found an investor. I had this like thesis, never really been like a hardcore entrepreneur. I had like a couple tiny false starts, but I had this thesis that the fintech world, where I had spent some time, uh, had a lot of capital coming into it, mostly from finance guys that had like a pretty good product idea. And they're pretty agnostic about the build. They don't really care like if they use Java or Angular, React, like I just want it to work, right? Um, and because it's your MVP or prototype, they also like weren't super um, particular about it.
Yeah.
They wanted to bring it to market, and then like a lot of companies, if you really you get further and further along, and you pick up some legs, you just rewrite the code base, and you know, and that happens all the time. So the first versions, I ended up having this vision for a company that could do that. I raised $2 million, and that seemed like a lot of money from where I'm from, but it just would not get me anywhere in San Francisco.
Yeah. No.
So I put sales there, and years prior, I'd done like a solo backpacking trip around Latin America, stayed in hostels, and um, just kind of experienced it. Thought it was a really interesting place, same time zone, and pretty cheap. I mean, I was eating a lot of steak dinners on the cheap, and it was a fun place to visit. I had also, in that MBA program I had spent some time in India. Just really didn't like it. It just wasn't a place that I wanted to travel to. I didn't want to visit.
Yeah.
So I decided on Argentina, and then I relocated there for the very first year of operation. I basically lived in Buenos Aires,
Wow.
and I wanted to be there. Like, this is my big shot, to build a company. So I was in the office every day and hiring and uh, meeting with attorneys and payroll companies and legal and entities. And I mean, it's like a black box down there. You just never know like
Yeah.
what's going to happen. But I wanted I wanted to see it firsthand. I didn't want to just rely on other people telling me, like what's going on. And it was really, really invaluable. So fast forward, 4 years later, uh, started to grow my family, um, and I was living in Hawaii. Hawaii is not close to Argentina. It's
No, it's
very,
not.
very difficult to travel to. Dallas, you can do it one way, or you can do a nonstop flight. But for me, I'd usually have to go, Hawaii to California, California to Texas, and then Texas.
It's like going.
Even,
It's like going to Europe. You
yeah,
know.
and then even Texas to Argentina is 10 hours.
Yeah.
So it's just a long way. So I just kind of got tired of that travel. So I sold my shares in that business. But I was so impressed with the talent base there, and I still thought it was really mispriced. And that's what was intriguing to me is you had this talent at the same time zone, even pre-COVID. Excuse me, it was just wildly mispriced. Like, how come no one in the States is using Latin American talent? Why is this not happening? So I created a second company that was doing what's called RPO, which basically means you're leasing recruiters to companies that are doing like going through a big hiring boom. So let's say you're a startup in Dallas, you raise $10 million, you've got to hire a bunch of engineers in Dallas or somewhere in the States. You just need you want a turnkey and a bunch of recruiters and sourcers that understand your world,
Yep.
jump right in. And I think it's a mistake when companies tend to hire a lot of recruiters as full-time employees. You should really look at recruiters as they're there for the hiring burst, and then you don't really need like a giant team of recruiters forever just for the
Yeah.
burst.
So, yeah. So
So
that's kind of where like a guy like you comes in, correct?
Yeah, so that company's still around. That's not Plug, but that company's still around where we had about 60 recruiters in Latin America that spoke advanced, fluent English, just like you and I on this call. And they would recruit engineers in the US for US companies, but more cost effective, and they could be project based. And once that company made their hires, we move them to the next company. And then Plug started about 4 years ago, where really kind of the best of all my learnings, of let's open it up throughout the continent instead of just Argentina. Let's get rid of all the layers like architects and project managers and just be a pure staffing play instead of solutions. And then the other thing we didn't really talk about was currency. Uh, Currency can be volatile in Latin America, so we just decided to pay everyone based on USD, US dollars, instead of playing the currency game and like,
Yeah.
wait, let's wait till Tuesday to wire that money
Right.
because
Yeah.
we gotta get.
You're playing financial gymnastics every day, you know?
Oh, yeah. So that was exhausting. It's like, what business are we in? Are we in the wire transfer game or the software solutions game? And
Yeah.
so anyway, all that kind of led to Plug and 10 plus years doing Latin America world.
Nice. So you must have feet on the street Argentinians, right? That doing the recruiting for you, because obviously you're in Hawaii, you're not Argentine or Venezuelan, you're not a local, right? So
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, 10 plus years in the region, I've met a lot of great people that have kind of been trusted team members of mine for a long
sure.
time and moved from company to company. We've got people in Nicaragua, Mexico, Argentina, and a few other places. So they're kind of feet on the street, locals, and they're building the database
Yeah.
and speaking like so. All the people we place are English speakers because they're speaking English with clients.
Right.
But there's something to be said about if there's like a little problem, uh, they're a lot more comfortable telling our team in their native language, and we can nip it in the bud. And
Right.
just like okay, everybody get back to the projects, and we're all happy, right?
Yeah. Nice. How's your Spanish, by the way?
What's funny is, well, living in Hawaii doesn't help because nobody speaks Spanish out here. But it's gotten progressively worse every year because the quality of the English speakers that I hire just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If
I
you're not
only
forced
actually,
to use it. So
yeah, never, yeah,
I speak Italian or enough to get by, but when I go to Italy, it takes me a few days to get cranking and all that, but I don't use it. I don't use it here
yeah,
in the States.
yeah,
And
yeah. It's
it's,
just like a muscle. If you don't use it,
yep.
it kind of atrophies.
Yeah, I've got a trip coming up next month, so I'm actually using Babbel to kind of refresh
Oh yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit just to get my ear going and kind of get a vocabulary, because you get there and you're like, my wife says the same thing. She says, we get there and I can tell you're struggling the first couple of days to remember. She goes, but literally after 4 or 5 days, you seem to start to roll, you know?
yeah. That's totally true. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I had fun kind of getting around and going to restaurants and taxis and Ubers and figuring like the day-to-day Spanish around. And Saturdays were fun because I wasn't in the office with my English speakers. I had to
Yeah.
kind of live it, and do laundry drop off and kind of just like daily life you got to figure out.
Yep.
So that was fun, but I mean that was 10 years ago. Today it's I'm not really speaking it very well.
Yeah. So, well, very good. So so I think we got a good understanding of what you do. I mean, I think offshoring and nearshoring is a great alternative for at least in my industry for technical help, because I know we've used companies like yours instead of hiring a full-time employee, and it's a lot less expensive. So it sounds like you're doing something that there's a need for, right? There's got to be a need.
Yeah, we do about 100 placements every year, and a lot of it is referrals. People are happy. They, tell their friends. They tell their CTO buddies that Latin
Yep.
America is really interesting, and there's just a lot more interest in the region than there ever has.
Well, Brian, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, someone listening to this says, "Hey, man, I think we may need his services. How do they do that?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Plugg Technologies is the name of the company. That's Plugg, and the website is plugg.tech, TECH.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Brian, I really enjoyed having you on the show. This was good. You know, one, having a podcast, and you have one too, by the way,
I do,
you know,
yeah.
I have all types of guests on. So it's always nice that, like, I knew a little bit about what you did. I hate having guests on that I know nothing about what they do because I really don't know what to ask. It's hard, right?
Sure.
So this
Yeah,
was kind of a good show for me because I kind of I've dealt with people like you, and so I kind of knew a little bit about it, which made it more fun for me. So I appreciate you
cool.
coming on.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. Again, Paul Delegro signing off. Until next time.